We've had some horrific forest fires up here in Canada, and unfortunately our neighbors to the south are getting a lot of our smoke. And it's easy to see when you've got this kind of kindling laying in forest floors and it's been bone dry. So I am in northwestern Ontario, which is the heartland of the Ojibwe Nation. But it wasn't always so. If we go back in time, the Dakota lived in this area. So the Dakota were in northwestern Ontario. They were in northern Minnesota and northern Wisconsin. And my story today, or my wee bit of history, is going to be about a mass migration of people and a change of culture. So if we look at Dakota, we know them today as part of the Sioux Nation. The other part of them, a different linguistic group somewhat, are the Lakota. So that's the division. And we think of them as Plains Indians, you know, riding hard across the plains on their horses, shooting arrows into herds of buffalo. But they were woodland Indians. Long before that, they were woodland Indians, not any different than our Algonquin, our Iroquois, our Huron. They built birch bark canoes. They fished from those canoes. They harvested woodland wildlife game. They made maple syrup. They did everything that a woodland native did. And all of a sudden, they're forced into exile. And one might ask, well, why would a nation that had lived in this ground for thousands of years give up their home and their way of life? Everything they knew was here. And I think you can sum it up by the word guns. So the Ojibwe, which were to a wee bit to the east of us here, they had contact through the Huron with the French. And for about 100 years, they're arming themselves with muskets. So basically, the Dakota were outgunned, for lack of a better way to put it. And they warred with them all through the 1700s. And they kept pushing them further south into the southern Minnesota area. And then, unfortunately for them, not only is that not insult to injury, but the Dakota Wars break out with the Americans, and they're forced onto reservations. And once that war is over, they push them into the Nebraska, what we know today as Nebraska, North and South Dakota, where they started to intermingle with the Lakota Sioux. And now they become Plains Indians, so their culture changes. But whenever I have the opportunity to trek, canoe, and walk in pre-Cambrian Shield, and I'm in boreal forest, I think about, in my modern mind, I realize how tough it must have been for the Indians that survived here. But it wasn't. This wasn't wilderness to them. This was simply home. They didn't just survive. I've said this numerous times. They didn't just survive, they thrived. But it's mind-boggling. So we're in an area called the Ouimet Canyon, and we were at Eagle Canyon earlier this morning, and yeah, it is rugged topography, and it amazes me how efficient and self-sufficient they were to live in such a harsh environment. Part of me too says they look to the south, and their trading partners were agrarian. So we've got the Huron and we've got the Iroquois. They were growing things. They didn't want to grow things. I think they had no desire to move and farm land. This was home for them. They were quite happy to trade their furs and peltries and other things for things that they couldn't grow, tobacco and such things. And anyway, fascinating. And I'm going to keep walking because my canteen's empty and I'm getting a little parched here. So had I been born a native 300 years ago, I think I would much more prefer to be a hunter-gatherer living in this part of the world than hoeing corn, beans, and squash around the southern Great Lakes. Absolutely stunning. Okay, this is some rugged topography we are in. That was quite a climb. You know, I stand here and I look out and I visualize those brigades of voyageurs in their birch bark canoes, and I close my eyes, I can almost hear them singing their songs. So anyway, beautiful spot in the world.